As if the entire world could stop in a single instant, Aisha raised her arm to grasp the handrail of the grand staircase at the Abano Palace Hotel, her gaze fixed on the slightly open door of room 712. The timid light of that tropical morning sun slipped through the gaps in the curtains, drawing golden stripes across the red carpet. Inside, no one would immediately notice the elderly woman lying on the floor beside the tea table, her face hidden beneath a strand of gray hair. For a moment, Aisha stood frozen, her heart pounding as if she could hear an ancestral drum beating in her chest. Without hesitation, she dropped the broom, ran along the soft carpeted corridor, and pushed the door open gently, revealing something that would forever change the fate of anyone who witnessed that act. The verse of silence was broken by the faint moan of the guest. Aisha knelt immediately, feeling the cold floor against her thin knees. With trembling hands, she lifted the wrinkled face of the woman and wiped her sweat with the edge of her apron. The gesture was so tender it seemed to weave an invisible thread of compassion. When she pulled the blanket back to check for injuries, the soft reflection of gold-rimmed glasses caught the light, revealing the image of hidden power. This woman was not just another ordinary guest. Compassion bloomed in Aisha's eyes as she cupped the elderly woman's chin, encouraging her to breathe deeply, murmuring words of calm as if cradling a fragile treasure. The second spark of emotion came when, in a flash of clarity, the woman raised her eyebrows, her eyelids trembling, and gave Aisha a look filled with silent gratitude. The veins in her wrist stood out slightly, her chest rose and fell in an unsteady rhythm, but kindness overcame fear. The young woman took the jug of cold water resting on the nightstand and brought the trembling lips of the guest to the glass, keeping her gaze fixed on the face that was slowly leaving the shadow of pain. Room 712, once impersonal, became the stage for an unexpected and genuine act of care. If in mere seconds Aisha could transform a scene of danger into a moment of compassion, who could imagine that this simple act of tenderness would trigger such intense events? If you want to discover how this innocent gesture from a pure and devoted housekeeper will turn the tide for her and reveal secrets involving the powerful owner of this hotel, subscribe to the channel now. Here you will find stories that prove kindness opens doors once locked, that small acts can carry the force of great storms, and that love appears where it is least expected. Tell us where you are listening from today. Your voice is essential in building this community of open hearts, and we want to know from which corner of the world you are joining us. And answer in the comments. Have you ever helped someone without expecting anything in return? As soon as the elderly woman regained some consciousness, her face still etched with concern, Aisha felt her pulse race and the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She knew she could not leave her there alone, still vulnerable. Carefully, she wrapped the sheet around the woman's trembling legs, adjusted the makeshift pillow with clean clothes, and, on impulse, pulled the cell phone from the pocket of her apron. Discreetly, she dialed the internal extension for the Abano Palace Infirmary and spoke to the nurse on duty, reporting what had happened without mentioning that this was a VIP guest or that she was related to the owner. All that mattered was ensuring quick care. To Aisha, every second counted. The corridor where she pushed the bed with the guest seemed to compress the air, and the echo of the wheels made her heart beat faster. As they walked slowly toward the medical unit, she held the woman's fragile arm gently, whispering reassuring words. "You are safe. I will take care of you." Just ahead, as she opened the frosted glass door of the infirmary, she was met by the attentive gaze of Nurse Amara, who stopped mid-report to come to the rescue. Without questions, Amara took over the initial examination. She checked vital signs, stopped a small cut on the forehead from bleeding, and arranged for a sturdier stretcher. Aisha, still kneeling beside the bed, watched each movement with her heart tight, a mix of relief and unease. She had risked disobeying direct orders not to interrupt cleaning to deal with medical matters. Now, she felt the shadow of a possible reprimand hovering over her, but the urgency to help had spoken louder. While Amara administered 4 fluids and adjusted the blood pressure, Aisha picked up a bottle of mineral water and offered it to the elderly woman. The woman turned her eyes toward her as if finding a safe harbor and murmured the name Aisha in a faint voice. The young woman froze. Her own name carried a sense of instant intimacy, but she only smiled and replied, "It is me, ma'am. Everything is going to be fine now." At that moment, the hotel's director of housekeeping, Mr. Obina, entered the infirmary in a hurry. Seeing them, with a frown, he asked in a dry tone, "What is going on here? Who authorized this intervention?" Aisha lifted her apron, exposing her employee badge, and answered with firm sweetness, "Sir, I found the guest collapsed and brought her here immediately. I thought it was safer than leaving her alone in the room." Obina's expression hardened in disapproval, but Aisha held her ground, remembering every second in which the elderly woman's eyes had pleaded for help. Without giving time for more rhetoric, Amara intervened. She did what had to be done. If we had delayed rescuing the lady, it could have been worse. Obina hesitated, his arms still raised, and finally let out a restrained sigh. "Very well, but record this as an incident. I do not want surprises." Aisha nodded in gratitude, cast one last look at the guest, who now opened her eyes with fragile clarity, and whispered softly, "Soon, ma'am, Mr. Adekunle will know how well you were cared for." On her way back to the cleaning floor, Aisha's mind was boiling with thoughts. An avenue of corridors and identical doors, the Abano Palace had never seemed so vast and, at the same time, so suffocating. How could she have imagined that such a simple, urgent gesture would become a reason for admiration, and perhaps a source of complications, especially without knowing the true identity of the woman she had helped? Back at her work cart, she took a moment to breathe deeply, adjust the mop, and return to her routine. But her hands would not stop trembling, and the image of the guest's tearful eyes remained vivid in her mind. "I can't pretend this is just another day of cleaning," she thought, as she pushed the cart down the silent hallways. The timid sensation of fulfilled duty radiated in her chest. Little did Aisha know that someone was watching her every move. Up on the executive floor, security cameras had captured the entire scene. The urgency, the empathy, the care with which she handled the guest. Someone still unknown was beginning to pay attention to the young woman whose kindness had broken through the hotel's hierarchies. Once her cleaning round was finished, Aisha could not shake the fragile face of the guest she had helped from her thoughts. When her colleagues left, she stored away her tools, washed her hands carefully, and, against the rules, went back to room 712. Night was falling with a warm breeze flowing through the corridors of the Abano Palace, and the yellowish lights cast dancing shadows on the walls. The young woman opened the door without knocking and found Mrs. Makeda sitting on the bed, her gaze distant, her hands resting on the white sheet. She pulled her apron behind her and smiled kindly. "I promised I would come back to see how you were." Makeda lifted her head, surprised and touched. In the mirror's reflection, Aisha noticed the moist shine in the guest's eyes. "You are very kind, my daughter," the lady said softly. "Few people truly care." Aisha stepped closer, took a cup of chamomile tea that had been sitting on the nightstand, and offered it to her. Makeda accepted the tea and breathed in its sweet aroma, as if it were balm for the soul. While the lady drank her tea, Aisha sat cross-legged on the edge of the carpet, resting her hands on her knees. "I only did what anyone would do," she said, but Makeda shook her head. "No, my dear, you did much more. You treated me with respect, with affection. I asked the manager to describe the young woman who rescued me, but they couldn't say. That unsettles me." Aisha blushed, lowered her gaze, and replied, "I'm just a maid. I work daily shifts. I never imagined being someone so important." Makeda slowly swirled the cup, as if recalling something. "When you lose your family, you cling to every gesture of love that appears. My heart faltered when I woke up and saw your eyes so attentive." Aisha furrowed her brow and asked about the lady's family. Makeda sighed and spoke vaguely. "I had a son, strong and determined. When I became ill, he was far away, taking care of the business I inherited from my husband. He never let me lack anything, but pride drove us apart. He thinks I'm too old to matter, but the truth is I miss his embrace." Makeda's words tied a knot in Aisha's chest. She imagined the pain of having someone dear far away, the longing that eats away at the heart. "Maybe he doesn't know that you need company," she suggested, looking at the wrinkled face. Makeda smiled with a gentle nostalgia and simply said, maybe. Instinctively, Aisha placed her hand over hers, returning the human warmth that was missing. The silence became enveloping, as if marking the exact moment when two lives met on a bridge of empathy. Suddenly, Makeda asked, with a penetrating gaze, "What is your name?" Aisha shrugged and said hesitantly, "My name is Aisha, ma'am." The elderly woman lifted her chin, whistled in approval, and repeated, "Aisha. A strong girl's name. I like that." Aisha smiled, feeling her shyness turn into confidence. There, in the room lit only by the lamp beside the bed, with no witnesses beyond the closed drawers, a rare bond of complicity was beginning to form. When the digital clock signaled 10 o'clock, Aisha realized it was time to leave. "I need to go back to the service floor," she said, standing up. Makeda held her arm fragile and spoke with a trembling voice. "Come back whenever you can, my daughter. I would like to talk to you more." Aisha smiled and tilted her head in a gesture of commitment. "I'll come back, I promise." Before leaving, she looked back and saw Makeda leaning against the pillows, focused on keeping the teacup steady. The scene etched itself into her memory like a portrait of tenderness. As she closed the door, Aisha didn't even notice the presence of Mr. Obinna, the director of housekeeping, who was waiting in the corner of the hallway. He kept a serious expression, and his hands folded in front of him. The young woman swallowed hard, ready to receive new instructions, or perhaps even a warning for going to the guest's room after hours. But instead of scolding her, Obinna said quietly, "Good work today, young lady." Aisha widened her eyes, surprised. "Thank you, sir." He nodded briefly and walked away, leaving her alone in the empty hallway. As Aisha pushed the cleaning cart toward the storage room, her heart danced between the fear of having crossed boundaries and the joy of knowing her gesture had been acknowledged. Little did she know those quiet words of approval would change the course of her life. Somewhere in the hotel, security cameras were recording her every step, and the message would reach the ears of the owner of the Abano Palace sooner than she could imagine. In the days that followed, Makeda's presence began to bring color to the corridors of the Abano Palace. Whenever possible, Aisha would find her way to room 712 even before breakfast was served by the official hospitality staff. As soon as she parked her cleaning cart, she would take a small stool from a closet, place it next to the armchair where Makeda rested, and lean forward, as if listening to a precious secret. Each morning, the guest revealed a little more of herself. Memories of her youth in Abuja, walks hand in hand with her only son through vibrant street markets, the day she gifted him his first toy car, his laughter as he rocked it back and forth. One day, Makeda shared a story that made Aisha hold her breath. "When Adekunle turned 10, I built a small homemade pool in the backyard so he could swim safely. I watched the pride on his face when, for the first time, he jumped from the edge with his little arms outstretched. That's when I understood my role was to make sure he always felt free. But when I moved to Lagos to be closer to my grandchildren, our visits became fewer. I think he became too caught up in business." Aisha felt the weight of loneliness in that muffled confession. Leaning back against the door, letting her apron loosen over her shoulders, she asked, "Do you miss him?" Makeda sighed so deeply the curtain swayed. "I do. He has so much pride that he refuses words of affection. Even now, when I call, I hear the phone drop on the other end." The young woman placed a hand on her chest, trying to offer comfort with an invisible touch. "Maybe if he knew someone was caring for you with so much love, his heart might soften," she suggested. At those words, a warm silence filled the room. Makeda lifted her gaze, her eyes shining with a trace of hope. "You are very special, Aisha. I don't know what I've done to deserve such kindness." The maid smiled, blushing, and explained, "I had a grandmother who didn't talk much, but she looked after me when my mother worked. She taught me that caring for others is also feeding one's own soul." As she spoke, Aisha felt a soft yet firm determination growing inside her, a resolve to reunite mother and son. There, on the cream-colored carpet of the room, a purpose was taking root that went far beyond simply cleaning rooms. It was the will to mend broken bonds. With every gesture, The glass of freshly squeezed orange juice placed beside the bed, the poetry book she smuggled in her bag, the flower petals from the garden she laid on the nightstand. Aisha was building a bridge between two worlds that seemed too far apart to touch. One clear afternoon, as the sun poured golden light into the room, Makeda began speaking about the hotel as if reciting a prayer. I saw this place born in the papers of my late husband. I remember when he bought the land, my anticipation as I visited the first column raised. I never expected it to become so grand. If Adekunle has his heart full of gratitude toward me, he will understand that true wealth lies in care. Aisha nodded, moved. I believe that too, she said. Will you help me find him? Makeda smiled with a mixture of affection and restrained impatience. If I knew where he was right now, I'd run to him. They both laughed softly, united by a similar wish, that the son's pride would give way to filial love. Little did they know that, at that very moment, in a lobby filled with artwork and glowing panels, Adekunle lifted his gaze after a board meeting and asked his assistant, "And that elderly guest, has someone looked after her today?" The employee hesitated before answering. "Yes, sir. The medical team reported she's doing well, but there was an unusual intervention by a staff member from the cleaning floor." Adekunle's eyes narrowed, his mind drifting back to childhood memories and to the imposing figure of the mother who had taught him everything he knew about honor and generosity. A tightness in his chest made him rethink the coldness with which he had pushed her away. "Who was it?" he asked, and the name Aisha sparked in him a curiosity that blended gratitude and surprise. As the billionaire rose, eager to find answers, in room 712 the two women raised their glasses of juice for a silent toast to hope. Aisha placed the glass on the nightstand and made sure the lady was comfortable. The next move now depended on Adekunle's courage to face his past. If you want to discover how the owner of the Abano Palace will react upon learning that a pure-hearted maid devoted her day to caring for his own mother, and how this could turn the entire balance of power inside the hotel upside down, don't miss the next chapter. Subscribe to our channel and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. And you, tell me, what act of kindness changed your destiny? In the days following the scholarship program announcement, the Abano Palace buzzed with praise and anticipation. Local newspaper headlines read, "Luxury Hotel Inspires Underprivileged Youth with Heroic Maid's Gesture." Social media filled with comments celebrating Aisha, the young woman in an apron who had become a symbol of hope. Inside the elegant walls, however, not everything was a celebration. Some members of the cleaning staff felt a twinge of envy and confusion. After all, until then, everyone shared tasks without apparent favoritism. Now Aisha was receiving invitations for internal lectures, coffee with the hotel owner, praise from the general manager, and even a special resume badge. One morning, as she pushed the cleaning cart through the lobby hallway, a colleague named Rosa stopped beside her. Rosa's hands trembled, and her voice came out low, almost a whisper. "Aisha, don't you think you're stepping ahead of all of us? I also skip meals to take care of guests." Aisha looked up, seeing the pain behind Rosa's eyes. Gently, she stopped the cart and spoke with a tenderness that had made her unmistakable. "Rosa, the program isn't just for me. It's for anyone who wants to study, grow, and make a difference. If you want to sign up, I'll help you with the application form." Rosa almost silenced her protest, but the tightness in her chest gave way to a shy, grateful smile. Meanwhile, in the main hall, Adekunle was planning his next move, to gather young people from the community, both current and future scholarship recipients, for a mentoring session. He wanted Aisha to attend as guest of honor, sharing her experience of solidarity. The next afternoon, Aisha was called to the executive office. Upon entering, she smelled the discreet scent of jasmine and felt the serene presence of Makeda, seated among velvet armchairs. Adekunle stood waiting, dressed in a dark blue suit. Seeing her, he offered a smile that mixed pride and warmth. "Aisha, I've invited some of the new scholarship recipients for coffee and a talk about dreams. I want you to inspire these young women with your story." I'd be honored, sir," she replied, blushing, unsure if she matched the formality of the moment. In the event hall, now transformed into an informal meeting room, 15 young women waited. Some sat hunched over, looking at Aisha with curiosity and hope. When she walked in, the silence felt welcoming. She asked them to share their names and dreams, listening to stories from girls who wanted to become nursing technicians, dance teachers, and community leaders. In each story, she saw the spark of determination that had once given her the courage to reach out her hands. At the end, she stood and spoke in a firm yet gentle voice. I believe the first step to changing the world is taking care of each other. You can become whoever you want to be, but never forget, humility and empathy open doors where fear closes windows. The young women's eyes shone, and in quiet applause, they expressed their gratitude. Aisha stepped down from the improvised podium and, in a spontaneous gesture, hugged one of them who was sobbing with emotion. Meanwhile, behind the scenes at the hotel, some executives exchanged cautious looks. The social program attracted media attention and guests interested in social responsibility, but it also required reallocating budgets and adjusting renovation schedules. Some even questioned, aren't we losing focus on luxury? However, public pressure and the pride of being part of a business that changed lives drowned out any internal objections. At the end of the day, Aisha walked to room 712, eager to share every detail of the meeting with Makeda. She found the guests surrounded by old books and letters kept in a carved wooden box. Before she could speak, Makeda opened her arms and pulled Aisha into a warm embrace. You were wonderful today. Your voice echoed my very soul. I am prouder of you than of all my son's business achievements. The young woman felt her eyes well with tears, not just from emotion, but from a new certainty. She belonged to that story of transformation. As she left, she found Obinna in the hallway, who, upon seeing her, spoke with a genuine smile. We've received praise from the board of directors. Congratulations, Aisha. You can go home early. Your work today went beyond expectations. As she descended the staircase, gazing at the warm yellow lights of the hotel, her heart beat with hope and gratitude. There was no doubt, the kindness that had begun in a silent corridor had reached the halls of power. But, like every adventure, this victory brought new challenges. In the weeks following the mentoring meeting, the energy at the Abano Palace seemed transformed by a wind of hope. Yet every change carries with it the cold breath of resistance. One day, during a board meeting to assess the scholarship program's balance, a foreign investor, Mr. Hammond, raised his coffee cup with a calculating look. Mr. Adekunle, I understand and admire the social initiative, but we must remember this hotel is a luxury enterprise. Shareholders expect financial returns. Could dedicating time and resources to in turns divert us from our main objectives? The silence fell heavy as wet sheets. The other directors exchanged uncertain glances. Some praised the program's image success, while others feared the cost. Adekunle lifted his chin, his hands slightly trembling. This program is strategic, he replied firmly, because it strengthens our brand and, above all, fulfills an ethical commitment. Furthermore, staff loyalty and public admiration will translate into steady bookings. Hammond frowned and muttered about unnecessary bureaucracy, but Adekunle continued, citing the daily emails of thanks, the guest posts praising the hotel with a heart, and the drop in staff turnover. Even so, the investor concluded, very well, but we will watch the indicators closely. If it hurts our profits, we will have to reconsider. Leaving the meeting room, the billionaire encountered Obinna's tired expression, who whispered, Sir, did you notice Hammond's tone? I doubt he'll maintain his support if he doesn't see strong numbers. Adekunle nodded, aware that for the program to survive, it needed results. He decided it was time to stand by Aisha, design success metrics, and present real impact stories. Meanwhile, in the training module, the former conference room, now renamed the Aisha Room, the young woman was in the final stretch of her presentation to a small group of investors interested in sponsoring the project. Her heart sometimes wavered before the suited faces and analytical stares, but her voice rang steady. This is not just about a scholarship. It is a transformation that benefits both the hotel and the community. Each student who graduates enhances our reputation and attracts clients who value social responsibility. She displayed slides with testimonials from students who had completed courses in reception, hotel maintenance, and gastronomy, and emphasized once more, the investments made here create true human mirrors. Guests who return and recommend this hotel precisely because of the soul we put into our service. Some investors exchanged glances and smiled. Others jotted down figures for potential partnerships. Among the chairs, sitting discreetly, Makeda watched with pride, her wrinkled hands clutching her leather bag. At the end of the meeting, Aisha stepped down from the improvised podium and was surrounded by questions about the program's logistics, satisfaction indicators, and expansion plans. She answered without hesitation, sustained by the confidence built from Makeda's warm gaze and the silent support of Adekunle, who followed each response closely. But not everything was a safe path. Backstage, Mr. Hammond approached Adekunle and hissed, "Congratulations on your made speech. Now, let's see if the spreadsheets match the narrative. I expect the detailed reports by the end of the month." The billionaire clenched his fist, as if fighting against an opposing wind. He knew that, to keep Aisha's dream alive, he would have to prove that kindness and empathy could also be translated into numbers, into bookings, reputation, and sustainable profit. That same afternoon, Aisha received an email summoning her to personally present the program's data. It was a challenge. Her humble background had not prepared her for financial debates, but she accepted immediately, determined to honor every dream entrusted to her. While she practiced her speech aloud in room 712, Makeda entered with 2 cups of ginger tea. Handing one to Aisha and smiling, she said, "Remember, my daughter, the numbers that truly matter are the ones that touch people's hearts. Never stop showing the real face of this project, the face of love and solidarity." The elderly woman's calm voice mingled with the strong aroma of the tea, creating a scene of courage and tenderness. A renewed confidence filled the young woman. If you want to see how Aisha will face the greatest test of her life and prove that compassion can also generate concrete results, don't miss the next part. Subscribe, leave your like, and get ready to witness the ultimate battle between empathy and cold figures, a struggle that will define the future of the Ebony Palace and the fate of many dreams. The big presentation day arrived like a whirlwind of sensations. Aisha woke up before sunrise, her body heavy, with sleep turning into butterflies in her chest. She gathered the printed reports, attendance spreadsheets, scholarship holders' approval ratings, video testimonials, and photos of the students in action, and placed them carefully in the briefcase Obinna had lent her. As she descended the stairs, she felt the watchful eyes in the corridors, the almost tangible expectation in the air scented with cleanliness. In the Aisha room, now decorated with hotel flags and program banners, velvet chairs awaited executives, investors, and some board members. At the center, a dark wooden podium and a gleaming projection screen loomed intimidatingly. Even so, when she entered, a timid round of applause rose. The cleaning staff passing by had stopped to clap with pride. Aisha smiled in relief and sat down to wait. Soon, Adekunle took the floor and gave a brief introduction. Today, this room becomes a space for the future. I want to introduce the person who makes it all possible. With her heart and courage, the leader of this project, Aisha. He stepped aside, set down the microphone, and discreetly moved to the back of the room, his gaze full of trust. The young woman stood and took a deep breath. As the lights reflected off the screen, she clicked the remote and the first slide appeared. Mission: to transform lives through education and dignified work. As she spoke, she presented impeccable attendance records, average grades exceeding expectations, and above all, authentic testimonials from students like Grace, who now dreamed of becoming a tour guide, and Neka, who planned to return to school to become a teacher. However, when Aisha moved to the slide with return on investment graphs, showing the increase in bookings during the program period and the positive mentions on social media, the video froze. The cursor spun in a circle in the corner of the screen, and, seconds later, the projection failed completely. An anxious murmur rippled through the auditorium. Aisha's heart leapt to her throat. She pressed the remote, clicking frantically, but the screen remained black. Within seconds, she noticed glances of disapproval forming in the corners of the room. Mr. Hammond narrowed his lips, and a director muttered something about technical incompetence. The heavy silence threatened to swallow her voice. Then Adekunle stood up and, in a gesture of solidarity, approached the podium. It seems the system is not cooperating at the moment, but what we're about to show is real and tangible. Aisha's competence isn't on a screen, it's in the smiles of the girls who now work with dignity. He held up a printed testimonial from a scholarship holder. Thanks to this program, I got my first job in the hotel kitchen, I support my family, and I go back to school at night. Aisha seized the momentum and continued without slides, relying on paper notes. She spoke from memory, with clarity and emotion, recounting how the students had gone from cleaning assistants to trained receptionists, how turnover had dropped from 30% to 5%, and how many guests had rebooked simply because they felt so warmly welcomed. She illustrated the human impact of the figures with her hands, and little by little, the audience leaned forward to listen again. When she finished, her voice thick with hope, the silence lasted for what felt like an eternity. Then the applause began softly and grew until it echoed against the walls. Mr. Hammond stood, his stern expression softened by a respectful nod. Aisha, you have proven with words and examples that kindness produces tangible results. I apologize for doubting you. Other executives followed suit, and Adekunle smiled in relief, proud of the young woman's courage. Later, in the main hall, Aisha allowed herself to relax. She received hugs from cleaning colleagues, praise from the HR team, and a heartfelt thank you from Obina. But the greatest reward came from Makeda, who waited in the hallway with a handkerchief in hand. She slipped her arm around Aisha's waist and confided, "You saved this program when everything seemed lost. My son needed to see that sometimes technical failures don't matter if the heart is working." In that embrace, Aisha felt she carried not only Makeda's affection, but also the certainty that compassion and resilience formed the most powerful alliance. Adekunle joined them, and together they walked through the hotel's lit corridors, celebrating not just a victory, but the proof that empathy turns into legacy. In the days following the triumphant presentation, the ripples of the Ebony Palace's social program spread through the city like reflections on a calm lake. News about the scholarship students began to inspire young people from underprivileged neighborhoods, and from then on, the hotel's reputation uniquely blended luxury with solidarity. Yet, with visibility came new challenges, and that was why it was time for Aisha and Adekunle to join forces to protect the dream they had built. Early one morning, Aisha received a video on her phone from Grace, one of the first graduates. It showed her assisting a group of foreign tourists with warmth and competence, while narrating, in English, the hotel services. The caption read, "All thanks to you, Aunt Aisha. Today, I keep my family together with my salary and dream of studying hospitality at the university." Watching that video, Aisha felt a knot of pride mixed with responsibility. Her mission now extended beyond the walls of the Ebony Palace. It was a commitment to the future of every young person who had believed in the project. Later that day, Adekunle called her to a meeting in his office, whose large glass panel overlooked the bustling city. He appeared with a serious expression, though his eyes carried gratitude. "Aisha, we are receiving proposals to expand the program to other hotels in our network," he began. "But to keep its essence, we need someone trustworthy to lead the coordination. I want you to take on that role." She clutched her apron to her body, surprised and moved. "Sir, I accept," she said, her voice trembling. He smiled and explained the terms: a salary fitting for the new position, working hours that respected her personal obligations, support from a small administrative team, and the condition that she maintain her regular visits to Makeda. The offer sealed Aisha's transition from cleaner to coordinator of social transformation, a role she embraced with contained enthusiasm, fully aware that an even greater challenge lay ahead. That afternoon, Aisha walked the corridors of the main hotel, this time guiding two newly hired interns. She taught them how to organize performance reports, how to welcome applications for new scholarships, and how to record each story of resilience to share on social media and in future sponsorship proposals. With each step, she regained the lightness of her early days, now mingled with the weight of responsibility. Every number, every testimonial, and every smile told a story of transformed lives. While she was managing tasks, Makeda came to visit. The elderly woman entered with her discreet charm, floral scarf on her head, dark carved wooden cane, and smiled. "You are amazing in this role, my daughter. In you, I see the reflection of everything I always wished for my son: courage, compassion, and leadership." Aisha held Makeda's hands and replied, "It's your legacy, ma'am. Everything we do for love and justice." But not everyone was convinced. In the marketing team, young executive Chioma, responsible for commercial partnerships, confided her doubts in a private conversation. "Aisha, I admire what you built, but some guests have complained that the hotel now focuses too much on social messaging and that it has lost the discretion it once had. Are we straying from our traditional target audience?" Aisha considered it. "Chioma, building customer loyalty means creating emotional connections. If we can offer luxury with a purpose, we will reach new markets, families who value responsible brands." Chioma nodded, convinced by Aisha's clear reasoning, and decided to support the program by developing campaigns that balanced sophistication with social engagement. In the days that followed, the coordination team faced a crisis. One of the main sponsors withdrew, citing budget cuts, and the scholarship spots were at risk of being reduced for the next semester. Aisha called an emergency meeting, drawing on the practicality she had developed during long hours of cleaning work. With Atakunal's support, who released emergency funds to finance the event, and Makeda's heartfelt video statement for the hotel's official page, the Solidarity Dinner attracted unexpected sponsorships. On the night of the event, tables set among elegant orchid arrangements welcomed guests who, in addition to a tasting menu, witnessed the live testimony of Neka, a scholarship recipient who had returned to her studies and now taught at a community school. Donations exceeded expectations, ensuring the full continuation of the scholarships. The audience, moved by the sincerity of the stories, erupted into applause that echoed through the marble corridors. Watching the light in the eyes of the young women they had helped, Aisha understood that kindness often needs a channel. You simply take a tool, whether it's a social program or a dinner, and give voice to those who deserve to be heard. In the early hours of the morning, the Ebony Palace awoke under a clear sky tinged with soft orange. The inner garden, now prepared for the closing ceremony of the social program, carried the scent of tropical flowers and renewed hope. Light wooden tables displayed symbolic keepsakes, framed photographs of the scholarship recipients on their first day of class, letters of gratitude, and at the center, a mural showing Aisha's and Makeda's hands clasped together, depicting the origin of it all. At 9 a.m., guests, sponsors, executives, and students gathered in a semicircle around the makeshift stage, where Atakunal spoke with a firm voice and restrained smile. "Today we celebrate not just the end of another semester of scholarships, but the beginning of countless journeys. Each young person here has received more than technical knowledge. They have gained the strength of affection and the courage to believe in themselves." Next, Aisha was called. Climbing the stage steps, she felt her heart beat in sync with the audience's applause. She raised the microphone and, her voice trembling with emotion, declared, "I started as a cleaner, thinking my greatest contribution would be keeping everything tidy and organized. But I discovered that mending hearts, brightening paths, and opening windows of opportunity is what truly transforms lives. Thank you to each of you for believing in this collective dream." The audience burst into warm applause. Makeda, eyes glistening, approached Aisha and, in a public gesture of affection, pinned the Medal of Honor to the young woman's chest. Visibly moved, Atakunal stepped forward into a tight embrace, sealing the partnership that had begun in a quiet room and grown to touch the world. Then, one by one, the scholarship recipients took the stage to share brief testimonies. Grace, now a tour guide, stood and said, "Before, I imagined a limited future. Today, I teach guests to love this country, with pride in my heart. Neka, now a community school teacher, said, I gained not only a course, but the right to inspire children as I was inspired by Aisha. Other young women, with steady voices, reaffirmed the program's impact on their families and communities. When the sun reached its zenith, Adekunle led everyone to an interactive mural. Each guest could write a message of encouragement to future scholarship students, turning the wall into a collective testimony of solidarity. Holding Makeda's elegant cane, Aisha walked along the mural, reading each note softly. You showed me the value of humility. Kindness builds bridges. Eternal gratitude. Each phrase echoed the purpose that had begun with a simple gesture of care. Before closing, Adekunle asked for silence and said, This is not the end. From today, we want to multiply this action across the entire Ebony Hotels network. I invite each of you to carry this flame forward. Find ways to serve with your heart wherever you are. At the end, with the sun already setting, Aisha and Makeda stood side by side, watching the mural come to life and smiles spread across faces. The young woman then thanked the audience. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment telling us where you're from and share an act of kindness that changed your day. Let's create a chain of hope. She then invited them. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss stories that prove a simple gesture can change the world. Turn on the notification bell and help us spread the power of compassion. Finally, she offered a warm farewell. Until the next story, may kindness and love always walk beside you.